The first shot of the day echoed like a clap of thunder across the sprawling ranch in Llano, Texas. As Zachary Ashton lowered his Winchester rifle, the deer he'd been tracking for miles finally dropping to the ground. April 1875 was shaping up to be a warm spring, and the early morning sun painted the horizon in hues of amber and gold. He knew he should feel satisfaction at the clean shot, but there was a hollowness inside him that no amount of hunting could fill. Zachary wiped the sweat from his brow and whistled for his horse. Titan, a muscular black stallion, trotted obediently to his side. The 28-year-old rancher secured the deer to his saddle before mounting. His ranch hands would be pleased with the fresh meat, but his thoughts were elsewhere on the stagecoach that would arrive tomorrow carrying a woman who would become his wife. The arrangement had been simple enough. After 5 years of solitude following his parents' deaths, the 3,000-acre Ashton Ranch demanded more than just a caretaker. It needed a family. Unable to find a suitable match in Llano or the neighboring towns, Zachary had done what many frontier men did: placed an advertisement for a mail-order bride. The correspondence with Miss Sarah Collins from Boston had been brief but promising. She wrote with elegance and seemed eager to start a new life in Texas. Tomorrow, their contract would be fulfilled when she arrived, and they would be married by week's end. As Zachary rode back toward the main house, the grand 2-story structure that his father had built with his own hands, he wondered if he'd made the right decision. Marriage was meant to be sacred, but this felt more like a business transaction. Still, many such arrangements blossomed into genuine affection over time. He hoped theirs would as well. "You're back early," called Emmett, the ranch foreman, as Zachary approached the corral. The older man had worked for the Ashtons since before Zachary was born and was more family than employee. "Got lucky with a buck about 3 miles east," Zachary replied, dismounting and beginning to untie the deer. "Figured we could use the fresh meat before Miss Collins arrives tomorrow." Emmett's weathered face broke into a smile. "Nervous about meeting your bride, are you?" Zachary shrugged, not wanting to admit the knot of anxiety that had formed in his stomach. "Just want to make a good impression." "Well, Ruth's been cleaning the house like a woman possessed. Been fretting over making the place suitable for a Boston lady." Ruth was Emmett's wife and had taken over the household duties after Zachary's mother passed. The thought of her preparing so diligently brought a warmth to his chest. "I appreciate that. I hope Miss Collins will be comfortable here." As Zachary helped Emmett drag the deer to the butchering shed, he caught sight of his reflection in a water barrel, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at the ends, in need of a trim. His face was tanned from years under the Texas sun, with a strong jawline covered in 3 days' worth of stubble. He wasn't an unattractive man, but he wasn't sure if he'd be what Sarah Collins had envisioned when agreeing to be his wife. "You should get yourself cleaned up," Emmett suggested, reading his thoughts. "Take a proper bath and let Ruth trim that wild mane of yours." Zachary nodded. "I'll do that." Then, with a hint of vulnerability that he rarely showed, he asked, "Do you think she'll like it here, Emmett?" The old foreman paused his work, knife in hand. "Texas ain't Boston, that's for sure, but this is good land with good people, and you're a good man, Zach. Any woman with sense will see that." That evening, after a bath that left the water gray and a haircut that made him look almost civilized, Zachary sat at his desk reviewing the ranch accounts. The Ashton Ranch was prosperous, with nearly 2,000 head of cattle and a reputation for quality that extended as far as Chicago. But prosperity meant little without someone to share it with. He pulled out the small photograph Sarah had sent him. She was pretty, with delicate features and light-colored hair styled in tight curls around her face. Her expression was serious, as was customary for photographs, but there was something in her eyes that suggested kindness. He hoped that impression would prove true. Sleep came fitfully that night, his dreams filled with faceless brides and empty promises. By dawn, Zachary was already up, checking that everything was in order. The guest bedroom, soon to be Sarah's room until they married, had been prepared with fresh linens and wildflowers from the meadow. A separate room for him had been arranged down the hall, proper distance maintained, until their vows were exchanged. The stagecoach wasn't due until mid-afternoon, giving him time to ride out with his men to check on a section of fence that had been reported damaged. Physical labor was a welcome distraction from his thoughts, and by the time they returned to the ranch, the sun was high overhead. "Go on and get yourself presentable," said Emmett, taking the reins of Zachary's horse. "I'll have one of the boys hitch up the wagon so you can meet the stage in town." After changing into his best shirt and the only suit jacket he owned, Zachary drove the wagon toward Lano. The small frontier town was bustling with its usual activity: cowboys fresh off the trail spending their earnings at the saloon, merchants hawking their wares, and townsfolk going about their business. Zachary nodded at familiar faces as he made his way to the stagecoach office. Mr. Patterson, who ran the general store, waved him over. "Today's the day your bride arrives, isn't it?" he asked, his eyes twinkling with interest. News traveled fast in small towns. "Yes, sir. Stage should be here any minute." "Well, congratulations, Mrs. Patterson and I started as strangers too, 33 years later, and I thank God every day for sending her my way." The encouragement bolstered Zachary's spirits. "I appreciate that, Mr. Patterson." Just then, the distant sound of hoofbeats and the rumble of wheels announced the stagecoach's approach. Zachary's heart began to race as he moved toward the depot. A small crowd had gathered, as stagecoach arrivals were always events of interest in Lano. The coach pulled to a stop in a cloud of dust, and the driver jumped down to open the door. An elderly couple emerged first, followed by a businessman in a crisp suit. And then, hesitantly, a young woman stepped down, her face partially obscured by a bonnet. Zachary stepped forward, hat in hand. "Miss Collins?" he inquired gently. The woman looked up, and Zachary felt the breath leave his body. Her face was marred by a split lip that was still swollen and crusted with dried blood. Worse, her right eye was surrounded by a dark purple bruise that extended down her cheek. She quickly lowered her gaze, clearly ashamed. "Mr. Ashton," she acknowledged, her voice barely above a whisper. Zachary was momentarily at a loss for words, rage and concern battling within him. Who had done this to her? Had she been attacked on her journey? "Are you all right?" He finally managed to ask, aware of the curious stares from onlookers. "I'm fine," she replied quickly, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. "Just an unfortunate incident during my travels. I apologize for my appearance." Zachary shook his head, anger building at whoever had hurt her. "No need to apologize. Let's get your bags and head to the ranch. You must be exhausted." He helped retrieve her trunk from the stagecoach, noting how little she had brought with her to start this new life. As he loaded it onto his wagon, he caught sight of the town doctor, Benjamin Miller, and made a split-second decision. "Miss Collins, would you mind if we stopped to see the doctor before heading to the ranch? I want to make sure you're properly looked after." Fear flashed in her eyes. "That's not necessary, Mr. Ashton. I assure you I'm fine." "I insist," Zachary said firmly but kindly. "It would put my mind at ease." Reluctantly, she nodded, and he helped her onto the wagon, careful not to touch her too much, concerned about other injuries he couldn't see. The ride to the doctor's office was silent, with Sarah keeping her face turned away from him. Dr. Miller welcomed them immediately, his experienced eyes taking in Sarah's injuries with professional concern. "Miss, would you like Mr. Ashton to wait outside while I examine you?" "Yes, please," she murmured, still not meeting Zachary's eyes. Zachary stepped outside, pacing the wooden boardwalk as he waited. His mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. Who had hurt her? Was it someone from the stagecoach, a fellow passenger? Or had these injuries occurred before she even left Boston? After what seemed an eternity, Dr. Miller opened the door. "Mr. Ashton, may I have a word?" Stepping inside the doctor's office but away from the examination room, Zachary braced himself. "Miss Collins has several injuries beyond what's visible," Dr. Miller explained in a low voice. "Bruising on her arms and ribs consistent with being grabbed forcefully and possibly struck. These injuries are in various stages of healing, suggesting they didn't all occur at once." The implication was clear, and Zachary felt sick. "You're saying someone's been hurting her repeatedly?" Dr. Miller nodded grimly. "I've treated enough wives of violent men to recognize the pattern." When I asked her about it, she was reluctant to speak, but she did admit that her former employer in Boston was responsible. Apparently, she worked as a governess for his children, and when she gave notice to come west, he didn't take it well. Zachary's hands clenched into fists. "That's why she was leaving. It seems so. I've given her something for the pain and some salve for the bruising. She'll heal physically, but—" The doctor trailed off, the unspoken concern hanging between them. "Thank you, doctor," Zachary said, reaching for his wallet. "No need, doctor." Miller waved him off. "Just take care of her." When Sarah emerged, her face was slightly less swollen where the doctor had applied his treatments. She looked exhausted, her blue eyes, the one not blackened, reflecting a weariness that went beyond physical fatigue. The ride to the ranch was quiet, with Zachary occasionally pointing out landmarks to break the silence. Sarah responded with polite interest, but he could sense her discomfort. "Miss Collins," he finally said as they approached the ranch, "I want you to know that you're safe here. Whatever happened before, whatever brought you to Texas, it's in the past. No one will hurt you on my land." She looked at him then, really looked at him for the first time. "You're very kind, Mr. Ashton, but I understand if you wish to reconsider our arrangement. I'm not exactly the bride you were expecting." Zachary pulled the wagon to a stop, turning to face her fully. "Miss Collins, I made a commitment to you and I stand by my word." She shook her head slightly, wincing at the movement. "You agreed to marry a respectable woman from Boston, not a battered governess fleeing her employer." "I agreed to marry you," Zachary said firmly, "and nothing I've seen today changes my mind about your character." But as the words left his mouth, he knew they weren't entirely true. Something had changed, not his respect for her, but his understanding of what this marriage would entail. She needed healing, safety, and time, not an immediate wedding to fulfill a contract. As they arrived at the ranch, Ruth came out to greet them, her welcoming smile faltering slightly at the sight of Sarah's injuries. To her credit, she recovered quickly. "Miss Collins, welcome to Ashton Ranch. I'm Ruth, Mr. Emmett's wife. I help run the household. Let me show you to your room so you can rest before supper." Sarah thanked her quietly, and Zachary watched as the two women walked into the house, Ruth already gently fussing over their guest in a motherly way that brought a lump to his throat. Emmett approached from the barn, his expression questioning. "Everything all right?" Zachary shook his head, explaining in hushed tones what he'd learned from Dr. Miller. Emmett's face darkened with anger. "Some men don't deserve to breathe the same air as the rest of us," he growled. "I agree," Zachary said. "But right now my concern is for Miss Collins. She needs time to heal, Emmett. I can't in good conscience rush her to the altar because of some contract." The older man nodded thoughtfully. So what will you do? Zachary gazed at the house, thinking. I'm going to cancel our marriage contract. Emmett's eyebrows shot up. Cancel it. But, and then, Zachary continued, I'm going to propose to her properly, not as a business arrangement, but as a man asking a woman to consider becoming his wife when she's ready, if she ever is. A slow smile spread across Emmett's face. You always were your father's son, doing the right thing even when it's the hard thing. Zachary wasn't sure if what he planned was right or hard, but he knew it was necessary. Sarah Collins deserved better than to trade one form of obligation for another. That evening, supper was a quiet affair. Ruth had prepared a feast, clearly hoping to impress their guest, but Sarah ate little, though she praised the food repeatedly. The bruising on her face looked stark in the lamplight, a cruel contrast to her gentle demeanor. After the meal, Zachary invited Sarah to join him on the porch. The spring evening was mild, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of wildflowers and distant rain. They sat in rocking chairs, the creaking wood the only sound for several minutes. Miss Collins, Zachary finally began, I want to speak with you about our arrangement. She tensed visibly, her hands gripping the arms of the chair. I understand. I don't think you do, he said gently. I want to cancel our marriage contract. Pain flashed across her face before she composed herself. Of course, I'll arrange to return to Boston as soon as possible. That's not what I meant, Zachary said quickly. I'm not sending you away. I'm releasing you from any obligation to marry me. Confusion replaced the hurt in her expression. I don't understand. Zachary took a deep breath. Sarah, may I call you Sarah? At her nod, he continued, you came here expecting to fulfill a contract, to marry a stranger because it was your best option, but circumstances have changed. You're injured. You've been through something terrible, and the last thing you need is to be rushed into marriage with a man you just met. But the contract is just paper. What matters is that you're safe, and that you have time to heal not just your body but your spirit too. Sarah's eyes filled with tears that she quickly blinked away. What are you proposing, Mr. Ashton? Zachary, please, he corrected gently. And what I'm proposing is this. Stay here as our guest for as long as you need. Get to know the ranch, get to know me without any pressure or obligation. And when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I would be honored if you would consider becoming my wife. Not because of a contract, but because it's what you truly want. She stared at him, disbelief evident in her expression. You would do that. You would wait with no guarantee. I would, he confirmed, surprising himself with how certain he felt. And if you decide that this life, or that I'm not what you want, I'll help you establish yourself wherever you wish to go. A single tear escaped, sliding down her bruised cheek. Why would you offer this to someone you barely know? Zachary considered his answer carefully. Because every person deserves the freedom to choose their own path, especially after having that choice taken away. And because I believe that anything worth having is worth waiting for. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, the distant cry of a coyote the only sound breaking the silence. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything tonight, Zachary assured her. Just know that you're welcome here and safe. The rest can wait until you're ready. She nodded, and he could see exhaustion overtaking her. Perhaps I should retire for the evening. It's been a long journey. Of course, Zachary stood, offering his hand to help her up but not insisting when she rose on her own. Good night, Sarah. I hope you sleep well. Good night, Zachary, she replied, his name sounding foreign but not unwelcome on her lips. And, thank you. As she disappeared into the house, Zachary remained on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the vast Texas sky. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in years, He felt a sense of purpose beyond simply maintaining the ranch his parents had built. Whatever Sarah decided, he would honor her choice. And in the meantime, he would do everything in his power to show her that not all men were like the monster who had hurt her, that some men could be trusted, could be kind, could be worthy of her heart. The following morning, Zachary rose early, as was his habit. The ranch wouldn't run itself, and there were cattle to check, fences to mend, and a dozen other tasks demanding his attention. But as he sat at the kitchen table, drinking coffee Ruth had prepared, his thoughts were on the woman sleeping upstairs. She had a restless night, Ruth informed him quietly as she placed a plate of eggs and bacon before him. Heard her crying a few times. Zachary's jaw tightened. "Did you check on her?" "I did. Offered her some chamomile tea, sat with her a while. Poor thing's been through more than she lets on, I suspect." "Did she tell you anything?" Ruth shook her head. "Not much. Just that her former employer had a temper, especially when he'd been drinking. She was governess to his children after his wife died. Said he started paying her too much attention, if you take my meaning." Zachary pushed his plate away, appetite gone, and when she refused him, that's when the beating started. Got worse when she told him she was leaving to come here, that last night in Boston. Ruth's voice trailed off, her expression troubled. "What?" Zachary prompted, though part of him didn't want to know. "She fought him off, but it was close. Too close. That's why she left in the middle of the night without most of her belongings. Took what money she had and fled." A cold fury washed over Zachary. If the man responsible had been present, Zachary wasn't sure he could have controlled himself. "She's safe now," he said, as much to convince himself as Ruth. "Yes, she is," Ruth agreed firmly. "And she needs to know that, not just hear it, but believe it deep down." Zachary nodded, standing to gather his hat and gloves. "I'll be out with the men today, checking the north pasture. If she needs anything, I'll take good care of her," Ruth assured him. "You focus on the ranch." Work provided the distraction Zachary needed. The physical labor of riding fence lines and rounding up stray calves kept his body occupied, though his mind frequently wandered to the house and its newest resident. By mid-afternoon, dark clouds were gathering on the horizon, promising a spring thunderstorm. "We should head back," Emmett suggested, eyeing the approaching weather. "That's going to be a gully washer for sure." Zachary agreed, and they rode for home at a brisk pace. They had just reached the barn when the first fat raindrops began to fall, quickly increasing to a downpour. As they unsaddled their horses, Zachary glanced toward the house and was surprised to see Sarah standing on the porch, watching the rain with what appeared to be wonder. "Go on," Emmett urged with a knowing smile. "I'll finish up here." Grateful, Zachary made his way through the rain to the porch, soaked by the time he reached the shelter of the overhang. Sarah startled slightly at his approach but didn't retreat. "I've never seen rain like this," she admitted, her voice soft but less tentative than the day before. "In Boston, it's usually more reserved," Zachary chuckled, removing his hat and shaking the water from it. "Nothing reserved about Texas weather, it's all or nothing out here." A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth, the first he'd seen. It transformed her face, even with the bruising that was now turning yellowish at the edges. "How are you feeling today?" he asked. "Better," she replied. "Dr. Miller's salve has helped with the swelling, and Ruth has been very kind." "She's the best," Zachary agreed. "Been like a mother to me since my parents passed." Sarah's expression softened with sympathy. "Ruth mentioned you lost them both. I'm sorry." "It was 5 years ago. Influenza took them within days of each other." The pain had dulled over time, but the memory still brought a tightness to his chest. "My parents died when I was 12, Sarah offered unexpectedly. "That's when I was sent to live with my aunt, who arranged for me to be educated so I could work as a governess. And that's how you ended up with. Zachary trailed off, not wanting to speak the name of the man who had hurt her. With Mr. Blackwell, yes, she confirmed, a shadow crossing her face. It was a respectable position at first. The children were sweet, 2 boys and a little girl. I loved teaching them, but after a year Mr. Blackwell began to change toward me. Zachary remained silent, sensing she needed to speak these words aloud. I should have left sooner, she continued, her voice dropping. But I worried about the children and I had nowhere else to go. When I saw your advertisement in the newspaper, it seemed like Providence, a chance to escape, to start fresh. And then he discovered your plans, Zachary guessed. Sarah nodded, unconsciously touching her split lip. He found the letter I was writing to you, confirming my journey details. He was not pleased. The understatement hung in the air between them, the unspoken violence behind it palpable. Sarah, Zachary said carefully, what happened to you was not your fault. No one deserves to be treated that way. She looked away, blinking rapidly. I know that in my head. But sometimes, it takes time for the heart to believe what the head knows, Zachary finished. I understand. Their conversation was interrupted by Ruth calling them in for supper. The meal was more relaxed than the previous nights, with Sarah even engaging Emmett in conversation about the ranch's operations. She seemed genuinely interested, asking thoughtful questions about the cattle, the land, and the challenges of ranching in Texas. Have you always lived here? She asked Zachary. Born and raised, he confirmed. My father claimed this land after fighting in the Mexican-American War, built everything you see from nothing but determination and hard work. It's impressive, Sarah said sincerely. He must have been a remarkable man. He was, Zachary agreed. Taught me everything I know about ranching, about life. He always said that land is the only thing in the world worth working for, worth fighting for, because it's the only thing that lasts. He sounds wise, Sarah observed. And your mother? A fond smile crossed Zachary's face. She was a schoolteacher before she married my father, insisted on educating me properly, even out here on the frontier. Had books shipped all the way from New York. Said just because I was growing up with cattle didn't mean I had to think like one. That earned a genuine laugh from Sarah, the sound bright and unexpected in the cozy dining room. It transformed her face completely, making her look younger, unburdened. Zachary found himself wanting to hear that laugh again, to be the cause of it. The days that followed fell into a gentle rhythm. Sarah's physical injuries began to heal, the bruising fading from purple to yellow to a faint discoloration that would soon disappear entirely. But Zachary knew the invisible wounds would take longer to mend. He kept his distance, not wanting to crowd her, but made himself available whenever she sought company. To his surprise, she often did, joining him on the porch in the evenings or walking with him to the stables in the mornings. She seemed to find comfort in the predictable routines of ranch life, and in the undemanding companionship Zachary offered. A week after her arrival, Zachary found Sarah in the garden Ruth had planted behind the house. She was kneeling among the vegetables, carefully weeding around young tomato plants. Ruth said you wanted to help with the garden, he remarked, stopping a respectful distance away. Sarah looked up, shielding her eyes from the sun. The split in her lip had healed, and the bruise around her eye was now just a faint shadow. I find it peaceful. In Boston, I had a small window box for herbs, but nothing like this. You miss the city? Zachary asked, genuinely curious. She considered the question, sitting back on her heels. I miss certain things, the libraries, the concerts, the bustle of people, but there's something about the openness here that feels freeing. That's exactly it, Zachary said, pleased that she understood. Some folks find all this space intimidating, but to me, it's like being able to breathe fully. Sarah nodded, then hesitated before asking, "Would you show me more of the ranch sometime? I've only seen the house and barn." "I'd be happy to," Zachary replied, trying to contain his pleasure at the request. "How about tomorrow morning? We could ride out together if you're comfortable on horseback." "I haven't ridden much," she admitted. "Just a few times in the city park. Then we'll take it slow," he promised. "Clementine is as gentle a mare as they come. She'll take good care of you." The next morning dawned clear and mild. Zachary had Clementine saddled and waiting when Sarah emerged from the house, wearing a borrowed riding skirt from Ruth's younger days. Her hair was braided and pinned up beneath a wide-brimmed hat to shield her fair skin from the sun. "Ready?" he asked, offering her a canteen of water. "I think so," she replied, a mix of nervousness and excitement in her voice. Zachary helped her mount, showing her how to hold the reins properly. "Just relax and move with her. She knows what she's doing." Sarah nodded, her posture rigid at first but gradually relaxing as Clementine plodded obediently alongside Zachary's mount. They rode at a leisurely pace, Zachary pointing out landmarks and sharing stories about the ranch's history. "Over there is where my father built his first cabin," he said, indicating a stand of oak trees. "It was just one room, barely big enough for a bed and stove. When he married my mother, he promised her a proper house, and he built every inch of our home with his own hands." "He must have loved her very much," Sarah observed. "He did," Zachary confirmed. "Theirs wasn't an arranged marriage like many out here. They met when she came to teach at the one-room schoolhouse in Leno. My father said he knew the moment he saw her that she was the one. Courted her for 6 months before she agreed to marry him." "That's lovely," Sarah said, her expression wistful. "To be chosen that way, not for convenience but for love." Zachary glanced at her, wondering if she was thinking about their own unusual situation. "Everyone deserves to be chosen for love," he said quietly. They rode in companionable silence for a while, cresting a small hill that offered a panoramic view of the ranch. Cattle dotted the distant pastures, and the main house looked like a dollhouse from this distance. "It's beautiful," Sarah breathed. "I've never seen such space, such freedom." "This is my favorite spot on the whole ranch," Zachary confessed. "I come here to think, to remember why all the hard work is worth it." They dismounted, allowing the horses to graze while they sat on a fallen log. Sarah seemed more at ease than he'd ever seen her, her face tilted up to the sun, eyes closed in quiet contentment. "Thank you," she said suddenly, opening her eyes to look at him. "For everything." "I haven't done anything," Zachary demurred. "You've done more than you know," she insisted. "When I arrived, I was broken, frightened. I expected to step from one cage into another just with nicer bars, but you've asked nothing of me, demanded nothing. You've given me space to breathe, to heal." Zachary felt a warmth spread through his chest at her words. "That's what anyone would do." Sarah shook her head. "No, it's not. Most men would have sent me back, or worse, insisted on going through with the marriage regardless. You're different, Zachary Ashton." The way she said his name with such genuine warmth made something shift inside him. He'd been trying to keep his feelings in check, to be the steady, reliable presence she needed. But in that moment, he realized he was falling in love with her, not the idealized mail-order bride he'd imagined, but this real woman with her courage and vulnerability. "We should head back," he said, standing and offering her his hand. "Ruth will have dinner waiting." She took his hand this time, allowing him to help her to her feet, but she didn't immediately let go, her smaller hand warm in his. "I'd like to do this again," she said. "See more of the ranch." "Anytime," Zachary promised. "It's as much yours to explore as it is mine." The days turned to weeks, and spring blossomed fully across the ranch. Sarah's physical transformation mirrored the land's. The bruises faded entirely. Color returned to her cheeks, and she gained weight on Ruth's hearty cooking. But more remarkable was the change in her spirit. The fearful, withdrawn woman who had stepped off the stagecoach was slowly replaced by someone who laughed more freely, spoke her mind, and moved through the world with growing confidence. She became a fixture in the garden, tending the vegetables and planting flower beds around the house. Ruth taught her to cook Texas style, and she surprised everyone with her aptitude. On Sundays, she accompanied the household to church in Llano, where she was warmly welcomed by the community. Zachary watched these changes with quiet joy, careful not to press for more than friendship. They spent time together daily riding the ranch, reading on the porch in the evenings, or simply talking over meals. He learned about her childhood in Massachusetts, her love of literature, her dreams of someday having a family of her own. In turn, he shared stories of growing up on the ranch, the challenges and rewards of the ranching life, and his hopes for the future. One evening in late May, they sat on the porch watching a spectacular sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. A comfortable silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant lowing of cattle and the creak of their rocking chairs. "I received a letter today," Sarah said suddenly. "From Boston." Zachary tensed. "From Blackwell?" "No," she assured him quickly. "From Mrs. Abernathy, a friend who worked as a cook in the Blackwell household. She says Mr. Blackwell has been telling everyone I stole from him before disappearing. He's even hired men to look for me." Alarm shot through Zachary. "Do you think he knows you came to Texas?" Sarah shook her head. "I never told anyone my destination except Mrs. Abernathy, and she wouldn't betray me. But it worries me that he's still searching, that he hasn't simply moved on." "You're safe here," Zachary said firmly. "I won't let anything happen to you." She turned to look at him, her blue eyes serious in the fading light. "I know, that's why I've made a decision." Zachary's heart skipped a beat. "What decision?" "I want to stay," she said simply. "Not just for now, but permanently. This place, these people, you have become home to me. I can't imagine being anywhere else." Joy surged through Zachary, but he tempered it with caution. "Are you sure?" "There's no rush, Sarah. You can take all the time you need." "I've had nearly 2 months," she replied. 2 months of freedom, of healing, of learning who I am when I'm not afraid. And who I am is someone who belongs here, with you if you still want me." Zachary moved from his chair to kneel before hers, taking her hands in his. "I've wanted you since before I met you, Sarah Collins. But now, knowing you, seeing your strength and your kindness, I don't just want you as my wife. I love you." Tears welled in her eyes, but they were different from the tears of pain he'd seen before. "I love you too, Zachary. I didn't expect to, not so soon, not after everything, but I do." He reached up to gently cup her face. "Then marry me, Sarah. Not because of a contract or convenience, but because we choose each other, because we love each other." "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Zachary's heart felt too full for his chest. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, he leaned in and pressed his lips to hers, their first kiss, gentle and reverent. She responded with a tentative sweetness that soon bloomed into something deeper, her arms sliding around his neck as she kissed him back. When they finally parted, both a little breathless, Zachary rested his forehead against hers. "When?" he asked simply. "Soon," she replied. "I don't want to wait long, but I'd like a proper wedding with the community present. I want everyone to see that I'm choosing you freely and completely." "Anything you want," Zachary promised. "We could even have it here at the ranch, under that oak grove you love so much." Her face lit up at the suggestion. "That would be perfect." The news of their engagement spread quickly through the ranch and into town. Ruth immediately began planning the wedding feast, while Emmett organized the men to build benches and an altar in the oak grove. Sarah wrote to Mrs. Abernathy, inviting her to the wedding and asking her to bring the personal items she'd been forced to leave behind. As June arrived, bringing with it the full heat of the Texas summer, preparations for the wedding intensified. Sarah and Ruth made a trip to San Antonio to purchase fabric for a wedding dress, returning with silk the color of cream that would be transformed by Ruth's skilled hands into a gown worthy of any Boston socialite. Zachary found himself caught up in the excitement, wanting everything to be perfect for Sarah. He commissioned a local silversmith to craft a wedding band set with a small sapphire that matched her eyes. The ranch hands, fond of their boss and increasingly protective of Sarah, worked tirelessly to ensure the property looked its best for the celebration. A week before the wedding, Zachary rode into town to collect some final supplies. As he was loading his purchases into his wagon, Sheriff Jenkins approached him. "Zachary, got a minute?" the lawman asked, his expression serious. "Of course," Zachary replied, immediately concerned. "Something wrong, maybe nothing, but thought you should know. There's a man asking questions at the hotel, saying he's looking for a woman who stole from him back east. Description matches your Sarah." Ice formed in Zachary's stomach. "Blackwell." Sheriff Jenkins nodded. "That's the name he gave. Said he's a respected businessman from Boston whose trust was betrayed by his children's governess, spinning quite the tale of innocence wronged." "It's a lie," Zachary said flatly. "He's the one who wronged her, beat her, tried to force himself on her. She fled for her life." The sheriff's expression hardened. "I figured it was something like that from the state she was in when she arrived. Don't worry, I haven't told him anything. But Leno's a small town, Zachary. Someone might mention her, especially with wedding preparations underway." "Thank you for the warning," Zachary said grimly. "I'll handle it." "Want me to run him out of town?" the sheriff offered. "I could find a reason." Zachary considered it but shook his head. "Not yet. I want to know what he's up to first, but keep an eye on him if you would." "Already am," the sheriff assured him. "No one threatens one of our own." The realization that the town considered Sarah one of their own brought a momentary warmth to Zachary's cold anger, but as he drove back to the ranch, his mind raced with concern. Should he tell Sarah? Would knowing Blackwell was in town shatter the peace and confidence she'd built? By the time he reached the ranch, he'd made his decision. Sarah deserved the truth, deserved the chance to face this threat with full knowledge. Their relationship was built on honesty and respect. He wouldn't undermine that by hiding something so important. He found her in the garden, harvesting vegetables for dinner. The sight of her kneeling among the plants, humming softly to herself, struck him anew with how precious she had become to him. He would protect her with his life if necessary. "Sarah," he called gently, not wanting to startle her. She looked up, a smile blooming on her face. "You're back earlier than expected. Did you get everything we needed?" "I did," he confirmed, coming to sit on the garden bench nearby. "But I also heard something in town that you need to know." Her smile faded at his serious tone. "What is it?" "Blackwell is in Lano," he said directly, watching her closely. "He's asking questions, looking for you." Sarah went very still, the basket of vegetables forgotten in her lap. "He's here," she whispered, fear creeping back into her voice. "How did he find me?" "I don't think he knows you're here specifically," Zachary assured her. "Seems like he's been searching in different towns, but he's describing you, saying you stole from him." Color drained from Sarah's face. I know," Zachary said firmly. "Everyone who matters knows. Sheriff Jenkins didn't tell him anything, and he's keeping an eye on him." Sarah set the basket aside with trembling hands. "What do we do?" "That depends on what you want," Zachary said. We could postpone the wedding, wait for him to move on. Or I could confront him, make it clear you're protected here. No, Sarah said quickly. Don't confront him. He's dangerous when cornered, vindictive. Zachary's jaw tightened. I'm not afraid of him. I know you're not, she said, reaching to touch his hand. But I don't want violence. I don't want our wedding overshadowed by this. Then what do you want? Zachary asked, turning his hand to grasp hers. Sarah took a deep breath, visibly gathering her courage. I want to face him myself. Sarah, no, listen to me, she interrupted, her voice stronger now. For months, I've been healing, finding my strength again. But as long as I'm hiding from him, running from him, he still has power over me. I need to end this on my terms. Zachary studied her face, seeing the determination beneath the fear. This was important to her. He realized a final step in reclaiming her life. I'll be with you, he said. Every moment. I know you will, she replied, squeezing his hand. That's why I can do this, because I'm not alone anymore. They decided to ride into town the next morning. Sarah was quiet during the journey, her face set in lines of resolve. Zachary kept glancing at her, proud of her courage but worried about the confrontation to come. Sheriff Jenkins met them outside his office, his weathered face grim. He's having breakfast at the hotel dining room. Seems to think he's making progress. One of the shopkeepers mentioned a Boston lady staying out at your ranch. Thank you, Sheriff, Sarah said, her voice remarkably steady. We'll handle it from here. I'll be close by if you need me, the lawman promised, touching the brim of his hat respectfully. The hotel dining room was busy with the breakfast crowd when they entered. Zachary immediately spotted a well-dressed man sitting alone at a corner table, expensive suit, perfectly groomed hair and beard, an air of entitled confidence. This, undoubtedly, was Blackwell. Sarah's steps faltered slightly, and Zachary placed a supportive hand at the small of her back. I'm right here, he murmured. She nodded, straightened her shoulders, and walked directly to Blackwell's table. The man looked up, irritation at the interruption clear on his face until he recognized Sarah. His expression shifted rapidly from shock to calculation to a false affability. Sarah, my dear, he exclaimed, standing. Thank heavens I've found you. I've been so worried. No, you haven't, Sarah cut him off, her voice cold. You've been angry that I escaped you. Blackwell's eyes darted to Zachary, then back to Sarah, his mask slipping slightly. I don't know what lies you've been telling these people, but you left me without warning, taking valuables that weren't yours. The only thing I took was myself, Sarah replied evenly, which never belonged to you despite what you believed. Blackwell's face hardened. You were in my employ, living under my roof, which gave you no right to beat her, Zachary interjected, unable to remain silent. No right to force yourself on her. The dining room had gone quiet, other patrons openly watching the confrontation. Blackwell seemed to become aware of their audience, modulating his tone to one of reasonable concern. There's clearly been a misunderstanding, he said smoothly. Sarah was unwell in her final weeks with us, imagining slights and abuses. My only concern has been for her welfare. Is that why you gave me this? Sarah asked, touching the spot where her eye had been blackened. And this? Her hand moved to her ribs. And these? She extended her wrists, where faint marks from being restrained were still visible to those looking closely. Blackwell's facade cracked, anger showing through. You ungrateful little, careful, Zachary warned, stepping slightly forward. Choose your next words very carefully. The businessman seemed to realize his position was precarious. The dining room was full of witnesses, and the story of an abused woman would find more sympathy than his claims of theft. This is a private matter, Blackwell said, lowering his voice. I've come to bring Sarah back to her position. The children miss her terribly. The children are the only ones I regret leaving, Sarah acknowledged, her voice softening slightly. But I won't return. I've built a new life here. With him, Blackwell sneered, glancing at Zachary. A frontier nobody with the man I love, Sarah corrected firmly. We're to be married in a week's time. Blackwell's face contorted with fury. You think I'll allow that? You signed a contract with my household for 3 years of service. You've barely completed one. I could have you arrested for breach of contract. No contract requires an employee to endure abuse, came a new voice. Sheriff Jenkins had entered the dining room, hand resting casually on his holstered gun. And I don't take kindly to threats against residents of my town, especially not a bride-to-be. Blackwell looked from the sheriff to Zachary to Sarah, clearly calculating his options and finding them limited. This isn't over, he said finally. You've stolen more than just yourself from me, Sarah. There will be consequences. The only consequence, Zachary said evenly, is that you're leaving Leno today, by noon. And if you ever return, if you ever try to contact Sarah again, you'll answer to me. And to the law, Sheriff Jenkins added. I'd be real interested in hearing more about those beatings. Assault's a serious crime, even in Boston. Blackwell's face flushed with anger, but he was shrewd enough to recognize defeat for now. Keep her, he spat. She's damaged goods anyway. Before Zachary could react to the insult, Sarah spoke, her voice clear and steady. No, Mr. Blackwell. I was damaged by your hands, but I've healed. I'm stronger now than you could ever imagine. And I pity you, because you'll never know what it is to be truly loved. Without waiting for his response, she turned and walked out of the dining room, her head high. Zachary followed, heart swelling with pride and love for this remarkable woman. Outside, Sarah's composure finally broke. She trembled violently, and Zachary pulled her into his arms, holding her close as she let out shuddering breaths. You were magnificent, he murmured into her hair. So brave. I was terrified, she admitted, but I did it. I faced him. You did more than face him, Zachary said, pulling back to look at her. You defeated him. He has no power over you anymore. Sarah nodded, a new light in her eyes. For the first time since I met him, I truly believe that. Sheriff Jenkins joined them, looking pleased. I'll make sure he's on the afternoon stage, he promised. And I've sent telegrams to the sheriffs in neighboring counties warning them about him. His kind isn't welcome around these parts. Thank you, Sheriff, Sarah said sincerely, for everything. Just glad to help, he replied. Now, don't you two have a wedding to prepare for? The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, as if nature itself approved of the union. The oak grove had been transformed with wildflowers and ribbons, benches arranged in neat rows facing an arch woven with vines and roses. Nearly everyone from Leno had turned out, along with the ranch hands and their families, all dressed in their Sunday best. In the main house, Ruth was helping Sarah with the final touches of her wedding attire. The cream silk dress was simple but elegant, with delicate embroidery Ruth had stayed up nights to complete. Sarah's hair was arranged in soft curls, adorned with small white flowers. You look beautiful, Ruth said, blinking back tears. Like an angel. Thank you, Sarah replied, emotion making her voice thick. For this, for everything. You've been like a mother to me these past months. Ruth embraced her carefully, mindful of the dress. You've brought life back to this ranch, to Zachary. I couldn't love you more if you were my own daughter. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. It was Emmett, looking uncomfortable in his suit but beaming with pleasure. It's time, he announced. Everyone's ready. Sarah had asked Emmett to walk her down the aisle, having no father or male relative to perform the duty. The gruff foreman had been moved to tears by the request, though he'd quickly blamed it on dust in his eyes. The small procession, Ruth first, Then Sarah on Emmett's arm made their way through the house and out toward the oak grove. The guests stood as they approached, murmurs of appreciation rippling through the crowd at the sight of the bride. Zachary waited beneath the arch, looking more handsome than Sarah had ever seen him in a new black suit. His expression when he first caught sight of her was one she would treasure forever, wonder and joy and love so intense it seemed to illuminate him from within. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful, the local minister speaking of love's endurance through trials and tribulations. When it came time for their vows, Zachary took Sarah's hands in his voice steady and sure. "Sarah Collins, you came to me broken but not defeated. I watched you heal, grow stronger, become more fully yourself with each passing day. I fell in love not with an idea or an arrangement, but with you, your courage, your kindness, your spirit. I promise to honor that spirit for all our days, to protect but never possess you, to stand beside you in all things. I choose you today and every day, freely and completely, as my wife, my partner, my heart." Tears slipped down Sarah's cheeks as she responded, "Zachary Ashton, you saw me at my worst and offered not judgment but sanctuary. You gave me time when I needed it, strength when I faltered, and love when I was ready to receive it. I promise to honor the gift of that love, to build our life together with joy and purpose, to face whatever comes as one. I choose you today and every day, freely and completely, as my husband, my partner, my home." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Zachary pulled Sarah into a kiss that promised a lifetime of tomorrows. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, celebrating not just a wedding but a journey of healing transformed into love. The celebration continued well into the evening, with food and music and dancing under lantern light. As the stars emerged in the vast Texas sky, Zachary led Sarah away from the festivities toward the house, their house now, truly shared. In their bedroom, a space that had once been his parents' and now would be theirs, Zachary kissed her with gentle reverence. "Are you happy, Mrs. Ashton?" he asked softly. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Sarah replied, reaching up to touch his face. "I love you, Zachary." "And I love you," he whispered against her lips. "Today, tomorrow, always." As they came together as husband and wife, there was healing in their touch, promise in their embrace, two people who had found in each other not just love, but home. 1 year later, Zachary stood on the porch of the ranch house, watching as Sarah walked through the garden, their infant son cradled in her arms. James Emmett Ashton, named for Zachary's father and the man who had been like a father to them both, was 3 months old and already showing signs of his father's strong build and his mother's curious nature. The past year had brought changes both to the ranch and to their lives. With Sarah's organizational skills and head for business, they had expanded their operation, purchasing neighboring land and increasing their herd. The house had been renovated, with a nursery added and a proper office where Sarah kept the books. Word had reached them, through Mrs. Abernathy's letters, that Blackwell had fallen on hard times in Boston. His drinking had worsened, his business suffered, and eventually, his treatment of the household staff had become public knowledge, ruining his social standing. The children had been sent to live with their maternal grandparents, a development that brought Sarah both relief and a bittersweet pang for the young ones she had cared for. But such news was distant, like thunder beyond the horizon. Here on the ranch, their world was full and rich. Sarah had become a respected member of the Leno community, starting a small school for the children of ranch hands and neighboring farms. Zachary had never been prouder or more content. As if sensing his gaze, Sarah looked up and smiled, that full, radiant smile that still took his breath away. She walked toward the porch, the baby now sleeping peacefully against her shoulder. "What are you thinking about, looking so serious?" she asked as she joined him. "How lucky I am," Zachary replied honestly. "How one stagecoach changed everything." Sarah shifted the baby to her other arm, leaning against him. "Do you ever regret it, canceling our contract that first day?" Zachary shook his head, putting his arm around her. "Never. It was the best decision I ever made. It gave us a real beginning, not one bound by paper and obligation." "I was so afraid that day," Sarah admitted. "Afraid you would reject me because of how I looked, afraid I'd have to go back to Boston, afraid of everything, really. When you offered me sanctuary instead, I couldn't believe it." "I couldn't do anything else," Zachary said simply. "Not once I saw you. Not once I knew." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun begin its descent toward the distant hills. The land stretched before them, their land, where their son would grow and perhaps their future children too. It was everything Zachary's father had worked for, everything Zachary himself had protected, but now it was more. It was the foundation of a family built on choice and love. "I love you, Sarah Ashton," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. She turned her face up to his, her eyes reflecting the golden light of the setting sun. "And I love you, Zachary Ashton, more with each passing day." As they stood together on the porch of the home they shared, their child sleeping peacefully between them, both knew that what had begun with bruises and fear had transformed into something beautiful, a love story written not in contracts or obligations, but in free choices and open hearts. And in the years that followed, as their family grew and the ranch prospered, they would sometimes look back on that first day, when a mail-order bride with a split lip and black eyes stepped off a stagecoach, and a cowboy canceled a contract to offer something better, a chance at real, lasting love. It wasn't the beginning either of them had planned, but it was the one that had brought them home to each other, and neither would have changed a single moment of their journey.